I want to begin with a poem by Audre Lorde, who was a Black poet from the mid-20th century. This poem is entitled A Litany for Survival. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Our readings today are full of women who were supposed to remain silent, who were never meant to survive. And yet, despite the fear I am sure they felt, they spoke up and changed the narrative. Because of their courage, the definition of God's people expanded. In reflecting on these texts, I am heavily influenced by the womanist theological tradition. Womanism is a term coined by the writer Alice Walker, who defines it like this. A womanist is a Black feminist or feminist of color. From the Black folk expression of mothers to female children, you acting womanish, i.e., like a woman, usually referring to outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior. Responsible, in charge, serious, committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, male and female. These two biblical stories are popular among womanist theologians because they embody this spirit. These women are acting outrageously, audaciously, courageously. They show themselves to be responsible, in charge, and serious as they argue for their own survival and that of their people. So let's start with Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. Clearly, these women are significant. Very few women in the Bible have their names recorded. Like, for example, the unnamed woman who confronts Jesus in our gospel. These women are named in 4 separate stories throughout the Hebrew Bible, and they're mentioned in a 5th. Their quest for recognition is an ongoing saga. This is the beginning of their story. The context. Moses had just conducted a census of all the Israelite men who would be able to fight in the upcoming war against the Canaanites to take over the land of Israel. He then lays out a plan to portion out the soon-to-be-conquered land using the census as a method of distribution. This means that any family who did not include a fighting man would be landless. Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah were disenfranchised. Presumably, this was true for many other families too. Surely, Zelophehad was not the only one among all the Israelites to have unmarried daughters and no sons. But it's these 5 with the courage to take it to the courts. And that audacious courage is rewarded. God affirms their demand and changes the law to accommodate families like theirs. Jewish tradition says that when God originally gave Moses the laws about property ownership, Moses was not worthy of knowing the whole law. Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah understood something about the law that Moses could not. And so God spoke through them to deliver this addendum. Their wisdom, born of exclusion from society, enriched the whole community. Unfortunately, their saga does not stop here. About 10 chapters later, men challenge the land grants given to Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. The men argue that if the women marry outside of their tribe, their husband's tribe would acquire their land in addition to his own. So this time, Moses sides with the men. He places marital restrictions on land given to all unmarried women. To receive it, they must marry within their own tribe. Fast forward several more years. Moses dies before reaching the so-called promised land, and Joshua takes his place as the leader. Joshua leads a successful military campaign. The land that Moses portioned out is now finally available to the Israelites, and each person is given their share. Once again, Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah come before their leader. They approach Joshua with a reminder of the promised inheritance God gave them. Although this isn't said outright, the implication is clear. The women had been excluded from the land grants once again. What had been promised in theory did not happen in practice. Joshua, unlike Moses, does not need to consult with God. He does not place restrictions on the terms of inheritance. He doesn't even ask if they followed the marital rules set out by Moses. He simply and immediately gives them the land. When the women dare to speak up, they are rewarded at last. The story of Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah is one of persistence, hope, and audacity. They keep encountering injustice, the same one over and over again. They keep coming before the assembly and the leaders, sometimes by choice, sometimes hauled there by others trying to take away what had been given to them. It's easy to imagine how they might have given up. After years of being shut out by their community, the promise from God must have felt tenuous at best. But they kept believing in their own worth, their own place among the Israelites. They kept believing that what God had proclaimed would come true. And just as importantly, they kept fighting to make it happen. That same spirit is echoed in the gospel story, too. God has made a promise, but it takes a courageous, even sassy woman to make it happen. Immediately before the story of the Canaanite woman, the gospel writer gives us an encounter between Jesus and the Pharisees, a sect of Jewish lawyers. The Pharisees complain that Jesus' disciples don't perform a ritual hand washing before they eat, and therefore what they are eating is unclean and forbidden by Jewish law. Jesus responds by essentially rejecting the laws about unclean foods. He says, "Everything that goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out into the sewer. But what goes out of the mouth comes from the heart, and that's what makes someone unclean." It's not about the laws you follow or don't follow. It's about how you treat the people around you. And Jesus' words are almost immediately put to the test. Here in this story, we have a Canaanite woman approaching him for help. She is not Israelite like Jesus, although it would be incorrect to call her a foreigner because Jesus is a tourist in her lands. But her race or ethnicity is significant. Remember the story of the land grants to Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Where did that land come from? It was taken from the Canaanites. Conflict between Israel and Canaan and the celebration of Israelite conquest over Canaanites is woven into the fabric of Jesus' society. What is clean and what is unclean? Anthropologist Mary Douglas explored social concepts of pollution, cleanliness, and taboo in her book, Purity and Danger. She describes it like this: shoes are not dirty in themselves, but it is dirty to place them on the dinner table. Food is not dirty in itself, but it is dirty to leave cooking utensils in the bedroom or food spattered on clothing. Similarly, bathroom equipment in the drawing room, clothing lying on chairs, outdoor things indoors, upstairs things downstairs, underclothing appearing where overclothing should be, and so on. Dirt is matter out of place. So where there is dirt, there is a system. The Canaanite woman, then, is unclean because she does not fit into the social system. She is a woman talking to a man, a Canaanite approaching a Jew, a person whose family is ostracized because of her daughter's demon possession. She asks Jesus to do something outside his own system of understanding. His priority is his own people, the people of Israel, but she forces him to look at other people too. Jesus' initial response reinforces the system that made her unclean. He dehumanizes her and her people, calling them dogs. He worries that giving something to the Canaanites will mean there is less for the people of Israel. In this way, Jesus is like Moses and the men who challenged Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They feared that giving land to a woman could mean that it passes out of the tribe to her eventual husband. That would be unfair. Jesus tries to maintain the balance of fairness by keeping his boundary of clean and unclean, the people to whom he is called and the people who are somebody else's problem. But the woman does not accept this answer. She counters with what we could call sass. She takes Jesus' words and she plays with them to expose the lie. Although she approached Jesus bowing and deferential, she now dares to talk back. And in doing so, she is also pushing back against his cultural understanding. In Jesus' Semitic culture, dogs were not household pets. Dinner leftovers might be tossed into the alley to feed the dogs, but those dogs did not come indoors. However, the Canaanite woman lived in a Greek culture. Ancient Greeks did keep dogs as pets, often allowing them to sit under the table during meals and to lick plates clean. The woman points out this difference with her words. Even the dogs eat the crumbs from the table. She is saying to Jesus, there is another way. What you think is the way things are does not have to be. It is in some ways an echo of Jesus' own response to the Pharisees. Just because the law says something does not make it true. Boundaries can change. Systems can shift. What was unclean can be made clean. Talking back, as this woman does, can be dangerous. Our nation has seen countless tales of women who dared to stand up to what they perceived were unjust systems and paid for it dearly. Sandra Bland, Renee Good. But talking back also has the power to transform. Think of the activists who took a stand in the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer. And transformation happens in this story. Jesus changes his mind. He grants healing to the woman's daughter. But just as importantly, he changes his mind about his whole ministry. In the book of Matthew, after this encounter, Jesus repeatedly reminds people that God's love is extended especially to those who are of lesser status in society. The Canaanite woman doesn't just heal her own family. Her sass reveals what healing needs to be done in the whole community. In both these stories, change comes from two places. It comes first from the women who are excluded, who are silenced and afraid, but speak up anyway. Their courage reveals great faith. Their audacious words highlight inequities. But unfortunately, words are not enough. The men in power also had to be open to change. Moses, reluctant to expand the definition of Israelite citizen, blocks God's will for a broader community. Joshua welcomes it. Jesus humbly recognizes when the woman's faith reveals what his could not. So, friends, what is your place in this story? Where could you have the courage to talk back when systems exclude? And where do you need to listen and change when others speak up? How can you commit with audacity or humility to the survival of all God's people? So may it be. Amen.